Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. Governor Phil Murphy recently laid out the state's spending plan during his 2025 budget address, and we're going to talk more about the details and get some perspective from a member of the Assembly Budget Oversight Committee. State Senator Declan O'Scanlon is standing by. First, though, a federal lawsuit has been filed by Congressman Andy Kim to stop what's known as the county line on ballots. Now, he's running for U.S. Senate, but he's not the only one who says the system is unfair. We're going to break down what the county line system is and why some say it needs to change. Here to help us do that is the state Senate Majority Whip, Senator Troy Singleton, a Democrat from South Jersey, representing New Jersey's 7th Legislative District. Troy Singleton, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me as always, Laura.
Absolutely. Now, Senator, if you've run for office, you know what the county line is. But for those who are watching who may not be as familiar with the jargon, can you explain what it is and how powerful this tool is?
Sure. So most county organizations, whether Democrat or Republican, have the ability to have candidates of the preferred party organization in their county line up in a singular column from the top of the ballot all the way down to the bottom. Inherently, those who are in that column typically have been shown to have a statistical advantage over those who aren't in that column. So historically, it benefits you if you're running for office to be in that column seeking to attain public office.
I mean, it's the first thing you see when you come into the ballot office is that first column, and that's what's so key.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it sort of draws your eye to it. And most psychologists or sociologists will tell you what draws your eye to. Typically, you'll sort of fall in line and vote in that particular manner.
And particularly when you're dealing with a primary where it can be lower than typical turnout as opposed to a general, even more powerful. And we have Congressman Andy Kim, who is running for U.S. Senate, who's filed a federal lawsuit saying, hey, this thing is unconstitutional. And you recently said at the Burlington County Convention, hey, this may not be so popular, but I agree. Can you tell us a little bit about why you've come out and said, yeah, it's not a good thing?
Yeah, well, putting aside the merits of the particular lawsuit, I think the courts will make that determination. I do believe we're in a position right now where ultimately that has become more of a relic of a past generation of usage to sort of develop candidates. I think if you're someone who's active and engaged in the community and are willing to put yourself forth, it really doesn't matter where you line up in a ballot position because people will know you from the work that you do. And I thought it was appropriate at that time to make a public statement that, I, for one, and I've signed on to legislation to this effect, think that it's not necessary for us to have in organizational lines as we move forward, trying to seek ballot position to determine who's going to be our representatives.
Well, when you were talking about getting more people engaged in the process and becoming running for office, whether it's school board or for U.S. Senate, wherever they're running for, there are a lot of barriers that get in the way. The county line kind of reminds you of something, back in high school. If you're in with the popular kids, or if you're in with the decision makers, they can make or break you. And if somebody's coming in from the outside, it's certainly much more difficult for a grassroots campaign to pick up steam. Can you talk a little bit about how it kind of discriminates?
Well, look, there's a lot of cynicism in politics today, and I think the ability for us to create a more transparent process that takes some of that cynicism away and lets folks know that the playing field is level amongst individuals, and those who are the best qualified, who are willing to work the hardest, should have an opportunity to present themselves on equal footing with anyone else. And I think that is what this sort of debate has been around. How do we make sure that we remove the cynicism, create greater transparency, and allow the electorate as a whole to make a determination in our representative democracy who their representatives should be.
Yeah, and you've come out and you've said, hey, even though I've benefited from it, I would support legislation that gets rid of the county lines. But those who are making the decisions have also benefited from it. So how likely do you think you'll be in pushing legislation like this through? Will your colleagues on both sides of the aisle sign on to this?
So, as I often say about public policy, every proposal almost has a season when sometimes it's ripe for it to move forward. And I think as public sentiment continues to engage on this topic, the lawsuit that Congressman Kim has filed is drawing obviously more widespread attention to it. I think either by legislation or by public will, we'll see a change over the course of some time. What that time is still to be determined. For many of us who run for office, whether you run on the line or off a line, et cetera, it still comes down to how are you engaging your community? Where are you doing the work in order to move forward? And I feel pretty confident whether I was in column A or X, people will understand the work that we put in our legislative district, and hopefully will find us worthy to continue to represent them.
Well, I definitely want to get to some of the things that you're doing within your district because you are out there. I mean, if anybody follows you on social media, sees how active you are, how much you are doing. But before we get to some of the things you're doing in the community right now, I did want to get a quick take on the governor's budget address that he recently unveiled. It's a nearly $56 billion spending plan. He's talking a lot about making the state more affordable. There are some people concerned that it is cutting aid in areas that need it. I just wanted to get your overall take on his budget address.
Yeah, well, look, there are things that I'm incredibly excited about. The investment in housing that the governor's talked about, things that I've championed over the last several budget cycles, working in partnership with Governor Murphy, saw investment in his proposed budget. So I'm really excited about that. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, just to be quite honest with you. I think as we look at some of the challenges with the school aid formula and how it pertains to also property taxes as well as the educational value we're delivering to our students, it's going to be ripe for further debate between now and at the latest July 1st when we have to have this budget signed. So I anticipate there'll be a lot of discussion as we move forward. Again, there are things that I think all of us can point to in this budget and think are really worthy and worthwhile things. And there's some other stuff that is going to be open for debate, and reasonable people will sit down and sort of walk through those things. I'm excited for that opportunity as we continue through the summer.
Well, I think the biggest portion of the budget, over $900 million, is going to education. He says it's the first time that education has been fully funded. Now, some of your Republican colleagues would say, well, we think the school funding formula is broken. But do you think what he's putting out there right now, $900 million to public schools, as well as universal pre-K, is that a step in the right direction? More to go? What do you say?
I think anytime we invest in education, we're making a step in the right direction. I think anytime that we put resources into the pot to make sure our next generation are equipped to carry the state forward are important. Ultimately, the devil's in the details. And this budget does create winners and losers when it comes to the school funding formula. I don't think we want to look at it in that fashion because there's no child in the quest for education who should be deemed a loser because they don't have the aid or resources that are necessary to help them achieve their own version of the American dream through educational attainment. So I'm looking forward to trying to find real solutions, working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. If we're really to roll up our sleeves and put in the hard work that is necessary, I think we can come to those solutions. And I look forward to that debate as we move through the budget process.
And then also just, your thoughts on universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, because so many families spend more money on childcare than they make. So parents are in a very, very difficult position. At the same time, kindergarten through 12th grade, that needs to be funded as well. So how do you strike that balance?
Well, look, universal pre-K is essential to creating a foundation for future education learners. The statistics and the data is replete with stories around actual factual stories around young folks who aren't able to start on their education journey in pre-K. They're slowed down as they're trying to matriculate through the K through 12, the cycle that you talked about. So I think for us, this is an investment in our future and is one that this state has consistently made over the last several years, led by Governor Murphy, which I think is really, really important to ensure that our foundation is secure for our children to have the educational springboard they need to succeed.
Right. Education, I mean, that really, that levels the playing field in so many aspects and can set a young person up for incredible success. I want to also kind of switch topics a little bit, going back to how very hands-on you are in your community. You are out there, out and about. Like I said, my Instagram feed, first thing that's come up is you got another program going, and always out there in the community. And this being the month of March, you're hosting a book drive. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to help those who live in the community, and also how you're out there connecting with members of your community?
Yeah, Laura, as you know, because you've been such a good friend in amplifying this work, we believe every month we have an obligation to do something in our community, to work endeavors to try and move our community forward. And for us, this month, in the month of March, which is Dr. Seuss's month, we want to make sure that we're giving back to help folks experience the joy of reading, just like I did as a youth, like so many of us did. So we're collecting gently used children's books here at our legislative office in Morristown. But we're also going to be partnering with an organization called Book Smiles, which I've had the honor and privilege of working with for the last several years, to actually go to their book bank and help them with our community service day of the month, to really help them sort all the different books they have, package books up, get them ready to get back out in the community, to help so many students have that joy of reading, which we talked about. One thing I say all the time: when you open a book, it can take you anywhere in the world where your imagination will allow you to go. And for a kid like myself, who grew up in an urban environment in Philadelphia before moving to southern New Jersey, I got to see so much of the world, as it were, just by opening a book. And it opened my mind to so many different things that I never thought about. So it's our hope, by this work and the continued work we do in the community, we'll be able to help others feel that same joy.
And I think one of the other joys of reading as well is that parent-child connection, or even it doesn't even have to be a parent-child, just being able to connect and to read to others. I mean, I've even seen programs where kids will read to animals at animal shelters. It's about connecting, not so much necessarily the context of the book, but making those connections.
Very true. I mean, look, when you get a chance to open that book and you see that bond, as many of us who are parents have had with our children when they started the joy of reading, it really just it connects you in a different type of way. And for me, that experience, I want us to have so many other people to feel it and understand it. And like I said, as a kid who grew up having an opportunity to get to my public library and sit there and just hours on end just reading books, it made so much to me in my maturation, and I hope it does for some other young child.
I interview so many people, public servants out there, those are in elected office, and they're so busy with their legislative responsibilities. You're one of the people who I always talk to, who seems to get as much joy from being out there at a book drive as you are in the middle of legislation or a fierce debate on the floor. Can you just talk a little bit, final thoughts on the importance of striking that balance between, the legislative responsibilities you have and then being out there representing and knowing the people who you represent?
Laura, I think you hit the nail on the head when you started with the term public servant. I think for so many of us, many people will forget our names on bills. They'll forget which bill we did, et cetera, et cetera. But folks will never forget how you made them feel. And for me, using my platform to help improve the lives of my neighbors, who I am absolutely so privileged and honored to represent, that is the best part of my job. That is the part of my job that I love the most as an elected official. And frankly, it's what drives me to keep me going, to do more to make my community better on behalf of my family and my neighbors.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us on all of these issues. We appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure seeing you.
Thank you. Same here. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. State Senator Declan O'Scanlon is a Republican representing New Jersey's 13th district. He joins me now to talk about Governor Murphy's spending plan, a $55.9 billion budget that the governor says is all about keeping New Jersey more affordable. Senator, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's just get your initial thoughts on that budget, the state's spending plan. What do you think?
Well, the governor's, top line that you just mentioned, making New Jersey more affordable. If this is the way to make New Jersey more affordable, we need to get more Republicans in power really, really quickly. The governor likes to claim that no new taxes, and has done that for the past several years. There are massive new taxes. First, there's the CPT, which is going to generate another $1 billion. And that money isn't being sent to transit this year. So that's a big one-shot tax increase. Then there's taxes on employers. There's taxes on healthcare. I can go through a whole list. It amounts to approximately $3 billion of increased taxes that will happen this year. Bracket creep alone will give you another $500 million. That amounts to about $1,000 extra dollars per family. The governor might like to suggest that the CBT doesn't impact residents, that there's some mythical corporations paying it. That's garbage. Those corporations will pass the cost of that tax down to every single one of us taxpayers. So it really amounts to about $1,000 more a year per family in New Jersey. So right away that the top line does not work.
Right. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Well,
sorry.
you're talking about the corporate business tax. Another thing he said in the budget is, hey, I've got a plan to address New Jersey transit, and it's not going to cost the taxpayers a dime. It's only going to cost businesses, our top earning businesses make over $10 million a year. They're going to pay for it through a corporate transit tax. What did you think about that?
Well, that's the tax I'm referring to. Right. And it's ridiculous. Corporations don't pay taxes. Corporations pass additional costs on to residents. You know where you're going to pay this? You're going to pay this at increased goods at big box stores, increased costs of groceries at larger grocery chains. We will all pay this. So it's ridiculous to suggest that you're going to put a tax onto some mythical corporation that isn't going to be passed down to the residents of New Jersey. That's just the absolute fact. And it's a distraction for the governor to suggest otherwise.
So Democrats have control of the Senate, the Assembly, obviously the governor's office. And when I was in Trenton the other day at the governor's budget address, Republicans were saying we're at the table, but, Democrats control things. There's not a lot we can do. What do you think can be done, should be done, that Republicans could get their voices heard so they have more of a bargaining chip at the table?
Well, what we're doing right now is making our voices heard loud and clear. And we've been effective in previous budget years of shaming our friends on the other side of the aisle into being more responsible. Now, is it perfect? No, but we don't have the majority. So we have to make whatever impact that we can. And we're doing that right now. Taxpayers are speaking out. Legislators are speaking out. We need to take this home and hammer it home until we can get some improved outcome. Unfortunately, look, this administration has squandered opportunities over the last 6 years to systemically fix our budget. Again, this year, we kicked the can down the road. School funding is a mess. It's a disaster for at least 100 to 200 school districts that are either getting cut or getting increases that are lower than the rate of inflation. There was a way to fix this that we really could have seized upon as we ramped up our meeting the school funding formula. The governor, pounded his chest with pride, saying, for the first time, we're going to fully fund the school funding formula. Well, it's a broken school funding formula. I would not be proud of fully funding this, and it's unsustainable. So we really have, once again, this year, missed golden opportunities to fix our budget systemically. We have a massive structural deficit. This budget is spending down $2 billion of our surplus. That's a $2 billion hole that we have no idea how we're going to solve going forward, unless you're going to continue to erode the surplus, and the whole thing is gone within 3 years. There's no strategic planning. There's no future forecasting, and it's a real shame.
Well, when you talk about school funding, he said the biggest bulk of the budget is going to investment in schools, $900 million to schools. He talked about universal pre-K, and you said that there are ways to fix it. How do you fix it?
Well, the best way to fix the school funding formula would have been to have tweaked it over the past 6 years. You could probably, with such tweaks, have saved us over $1 billion a year recurring to chip away at our structural deficit, while ramping up additional dollars to these school districts that needed it and were underfunded under the formula for years, that really needed it, and also avoided the cuts to the hundreds of school districts that are essentially getting cuts. So that is one of the main ways that you could fix the school funding formula and helped our overall budget. Yeah. And we squandered it. We're never getting that back. Now that money's out the door to these districts, many of whom, the ones that are getting huge increases, have no idea how they're going to spend it. I mean, it's just squandered money, billions of our tax dollars that, again, recurring, we could have saved, that is now gone forever.
Yeah, well, the devil's definitely in the details when it comes to the state budget. And I was hearing from a number of Republicans saying, hey, the governor's talking about making the state more affordable, but there are so many cuts to so many municipalities. And when you look at education and properly funding education, I'll go back to the Christie Whitman years when you had that Abbott versus Burke decision, the suburban versus urban schools, and it was more or less putting money into urban schools to try to level that playing field and make education better quality for those in the urban areas as opposed to the wealthier suburban areas, and it didn't work. And so now you're saying there's more money going out to schools, and again, he's talking about universal pre-K as well, but there's not transparency and accountability. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yeah, and there's a fundamental misapplication of this money. Go back to Abbott versus Burke. Those districts are getting, many of those districts getting the lion's share of the additional $900 million. Many of them, since Abbott versus Burke, have become wealthy districts as opposed to poor districts and can afford to fund their own schools to a great extent. We haven't made a change, a substantive change in the school funding formula since 2008. Much has changed since then. It should have been evolving during the entire Murphy administration, and it hasn't. We've done nothing other than dump money into it based on that 2008 formula that even then was unsustainable. The only reason why you could fully fund it this year is because we're still rolling in cash from the pandemic, federal money, unnecessarily borrowed money, and just the rebound in revenues. That's going to go away, and we're going to be stuck with a formula that we can't afford and an entire budget that we can't sustain.
Yeah. So how do you plan on working with colleagues across party lines to address these concerns and support initiatives that, are presented by Governor Murphy and bring into alignment, the reality of what so many districts are facing? Because there are so many cuts at these local levels that you're not going to hear in that, 1 hour speech that he gave.
Well, you're going to hear it from us. And we're going to do what we started to do here and what we've done the last several years. We've come up with comprehensive alternative plans, which were much more fiscally sound, much more sustainable, and much less impact, in fact, positive impact on the taxpayers in New Jersey. We're going to continue to do that. We will, look, the Democrats are going to need us for some votes. They want bipartisan support for policy. If they want that, they're going to have us at the table, and their policies are going to have to make more sense from a practical and fiscal standpoint. And we'll force that hand. And we're doing it right now.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about strategies when it comes to transparency and accountability? The legislature now, they are dealing with the budget. You have until June 30th to pass a balanced budget. That's in our state constitution. That has to happen. At the end of last year's budget, as it does with many budget cycles, is in order to get things done, that negotiation, the art of negotiation, sometimes legislators' pet projects get through, and last year was upwards of $1 billion in some of these Christmas tree items. So how are you going to navigate and really, hold feet to the fire when it comes to transparency and accountability in implementation of the budget?
We thoroughly shamed our friends on the other side of the aisle last year. Nobody had seen the budget that was voted on. We didn't even have accurate score sheets of line items when we voted on it, without any public input, and right at the last minute. That was outrageous. That's no way to pass a budget. No way to run a state. And we shamed them enough that they admitted that it was a tragically flawed process. So we hope this year to push them to ensure, and unfortunately they're already talking about kicking the can down the road. The governor himself, I think, said, we want to fix this process in the future. And that's a problem. There's no reason why we can't come up with standards of transparency and accountability right now and live by them. Republicans have done it for years. We instituted a policy where if our own members are going to advocate for additional money in the budget, myself included, you have to come up with an explanation. You have to have your name on it. And you have to have a thorough detailing of what that money would go to. That ain't hard to do. The problem is much of what the Democrats are advocating for is absolute unnecessary pork that doesn't benefit the people in New Jersey as a whole. And it just aren't things that the state ought to be funding. I mean, look, rather than fund, important things like tax relief, like some transportation issues, like, the folks that are really needy, we funded cricket fields and French museums. Those were higher on the list than these needy people and these much more worthy projects. And there's no transparency to it. There's no fair and open process to it. There should be. And Republicans are going to continue to push for that.
Well, we're just at the beginning of that budget process. We thank you for taking the time to talk to us today as you start that negotiation, and we look forward to having you back on as you make your way through the process.
Thanks. I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
And we thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.